January 26, 1945, a burning M10 tank destroyer sits in a snow-covered field outside Holtzwihr, France. Flames lick the hull. Ammunition inside could detonate at any second. And standing on top of it, gripping a .50 caliber machine gun, is a single American soldier. He is 19 years old. Waves of German infantry in white camouflage advance through the snow toward him. Tanks rumble across the frozen ground. His company has retreated to the woods behind him. He is alone. For the next hour, this malnourished Texas sharecropper's son will hold off an entire German assault force. But to understand why he refused to run, we must go back 5 months to a hillside in southern France where he watched his best friend die. August 15, 1944, the first day of Operation Dragoon, the Allied invasion of southern France. Staff Sergeant Audie Murphy and the men of Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, had come ashore near the small coastal town of Ramatuelle just hours earlier. Now they were pushing inland, and a German machine gun position on a boulder-covered hill had pinned them down. Moving alongside Murphy was Private First Class Lattie Tipton, a lanky 33-year-old from Irwin, Tennessee. The two men had been inseparable since Sicily, more than a year of combat forging a bond that went deeper than friendship. Foxhole buddies, the soldiers called it. They shared everything: food, water, blankets, the letters from home that reminded them why they were fighting. Tipton had a 12-year-old daughter back in Tennessee, and he read Murphy parts of nearly every letter she sent. Murphy made a secret vow to himself that Tipton would make it home to her in one piece. When Tipton was offered a promotion to sergeant, he turned it down so he could stay with Murphy as a runner. That morning on the hillside, Murphy noticed blood streaming down the side of Tipton's head. A bullet had torn off part of his ear. Murphy told him to fall back and get it treated. Tipton refused. "Come on, Murphy," he said. "Let's move up. They can kill us, but they can't eat us. It's against the law." They worked their way up a rocky draw toward the German positions, bullets cracking off the stones around them. They located a machine gun emplacement and destroyed it with rifle fire and grenades. A second German position opened up on them, and they forced it to surrender. Then the Germans waved a white flag. Tipton, despite more than a year of combat experience, made the mistake of standing up to assess the surrender. The German machine guns cut him down where he stood. Something broke inside Audie Murphy. In a blind rage, he charged the position that had just killed his best friend. He destroyed the machine gun crew with grenades, then seized their weapon and turned it on the remaining German positions. Using the captured gun, he cleared emplacement after emplacement, killing every German soldier he could find. When it was over, Murphy went back and dragged Tipton's body out of the foxhole. He laid him under a cork tree and placed a pillow beneath his head. In Tipton's personal effects, he found the photograph of the 12-year-old daughter who would never see her father again. Sergeant Tom Godfrey, watching from nearby, later said it was the first and only time he ever saw Murphy cry. For his actions that day, Audie Murphy received the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's second highest award for valor. He gave the medal to Tipton's daughter. The death of Lattie Tipton would haunt Murphy for the rest of his life, and it would transform him into something the Germans had never encountered before, a soldier who showed no mercy because he had learned what mercy cost. To understand where that fury came from, you have to understand where Audie Murphy came from. He was born on June 20th, 1925 in Kingston, a small rural community in Hunt County, Texas. The 7th of 12 children in a family of dirt-poor sharecroppers. His father, Emmett Barry Murphy, drifted in and out of their lives before abandoning them entirely when Audie was around 12 years old. His mother, Josie Bell, struggled to keep the family fed. Audie dropped out of school in the 5th grade to work. He picked cotton for $1 a day. He took odd jobs at a general store and a radio repair shop. But it was his skill with a rifle that kept the family alive. He hunted rabbits and squirrels in the fields around their dilapidated farmhouse, and whatever he killed went straight to the dinner table. By the time he was a teenager, Audie Murphy was one of the best shots in Hunt County. He was also, by all accounts, a difficult child. A loner with mood swings and an explosive temper. The poverty and instability of his upbringing had hardened him in ways that would serve him well in combat and haunt him afterward. On May 23, 1941, his mother died. Audie was 16 years old. His 3 youngest siblings were placed in an orphanage. He swore he would get them back. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor 7 months later, Murphy saw his chance. He tried to enlist in the Marines. They rejected him for being underweight and underage. He tried the Navy. Same result. He tried the Army paratroopers. Rejected again. At 5 feet 5 inches and barely 110 pounds, Audie Murphy did not look like a soldier. His older sister, Corinne, forged an affidavit adding a year to his age. On June 30th, 1942, the United States Army finally accepted him. The branch that had almost turned him away would eventually call him the most decorated soldier in American history. By January 1945, Murphy had fought through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and France. He had earned a battlefield commission, rising from private to second lieutenant. He had been wounded twice and decorated repeatedly. And he had watched his best friend die in his arms. Now he and the 3rd Infantry Division were being sent to a frozen corner of eastern France to destroy the last German stronghold on French soil, a place called the Colmar Pocket. The Pocket was a German bridgehead on the west bank of the Rhine River, 65 kilometers long and 50 kilometers deep. It had been held by the German 19th Army since November 1944, when the Allied offensive through the Vosges Mountains had stalled in central Alsace. The strategic danger was real. If the Germans broke out of the pocket, they could threaten the rear of the entire Allied advance. They could potentially cut supply lines, retake the vital port of Antwerp, and throw the liberation of Europe into chaos. The pocket could not be ignored or contained. It had to be destroyed. On New Year's Day 1945, the Germans had launched Operation Nordwind, their last major offensive on the Western Front. The goal was to recapture Strasbourg and link up with forces in the Ardennes. The French held the line south of the city, and Nordwind failed. But the pocket remained. General Eisenhower ordered its elimination. The mission fell to the French First Army, reinforced by the United States 21st Corps. Among the American units assigned to the operation was the 3rd Infantry Division, veterans of some of the bloodiest fighting in the European theater. Audie Murphy's division. Opposing them was General Siegfried Rasp's 19th Army, including the elite 2nd Mountain Division, hardened troops who had been transferred from Norway and trained for exactly the kind of brutal winter warfare they were about to face. And the winter of 1945 in Alsace was brutal beyond imagination. General Jean de Lattre de Tassin, commander of the French First Army, described the conditions as Siberian. Temperatures plunged to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Winds howled across the flat Alsatian plain, driving snow into drifts more than a meter deep. The ground was frozen so solid that soldiers could not dig foxholes. They would have to fight exposed, with virtually no cover except the occasional stand of trees. The terrain offered every advantage to the defender. The plain was laced with rivers and drainage canals whose frozen surfaces could give way without warning, swallowing vehicles and men. Dotting the landscape were small villages of sturdy masonry houses, each one a potential fortress where German troops could watch the surrounding fields from upper-story windows. On January 22, 1945, the 3rd Infantry Division moved out from the relative safety of the Vosges foothills onto the exposed Rhine Valley floor. Ahead lay a nightmare of frozen earth, entrenched Germans, and 16 days of brutal combat that would reduce Company B from 235 men to barely a squad. The 3rd Division's objective was to cross the Ill River, bypass the city of Colmar to the north, and seize the bridges at Neuf-Brissac that supplied the German forces in the pocket. On paper, it was a straightforward advance. In reality, it would become one of the most savage fighting withdrawals the division had ever experienced. The 30th Infantry Regiment led the attack, crossing the Ill River north of a timber bridge at a small farm called Maison Rouge. By early morning on January 23rd, they had captured the bridge and began pushing south into the Riedweir Woods, a forest that stood between them and the towns of Riedweir and Holzweir. Then the first disaster struck. The bridge at Maison Rouge collapsed under the weight of an American tank. The span had looked solid enough, but the frozen timber gave way, sending the Sherman into the icy water below. Without that bridge, the 30th Infantry had no way to bring armor forward. They would have to advance against German tanks with nothing but bazookas and 3 57mm anti-tank guns. The men pushed deeper into the Riedweir Woods anyway. The ground beneath their boots was frozen iron hard. When they tried to dig foxholes, their entrenching tools bounced off the earth as if it were concrete. They had no cover, they had no armor, and they were walking into a trap. Late in the afternoon, the Germans counterattacked. The assault came from the 708th Volksgrenadier Division and the 280th Assault Gun Battalion. Heavy tank destroyers rumbled out of the tree line, their long guns searching for targets. German infantry followed in their wake, moving through the snow in disciplined waves. The men of the 30th Infantry had nothing that could stop those tank destroyers. Bazooka rounds glanced off the thick armor. The 57mm guns were too few and too light. With no cover and no way to dig in, the Americans were caught in the open like targets on a firing range. The withdrawal began as an orderly retreat. It did not stay that way for long. As German shells tore into their ranks and machine gun fire raked the snow-covered fields, the retreat became a rout. Men ran for the river, abandoning equipment, dragging wounded comrades through the drifts. By the time the survivors reached the west bank of the Ill, the 30th Infantry had taken catastrophic casualties. The regiment was out of action for 3 days while it reorganized. But the 3rd Division could not wait. The advance had to continue. On January 25th, the 15th Infantry Regiment moved forward to take over where the 30th had failed. This was Audie Murphy's regiment. Company B, 1st Battalion, 15th Infantry. The men who had survived Sicily and Anzio and the drive through France. Now they were walking into the same frozen hell that had shattered the 30th. They recaptured the bridge at Maison Rouge and pushed south toward the Riedweir Woods. Engineers worked through the night to erect a new bridge north of the farm, one that could support American tanks. By dawn, armor was finally moving forward to support the infantry. It was not enough. The Germans counterattacked again. Early in the morning, enemy tanks and infantry overran an exposed rifle company of the 15th Infantry. The Americans fought back with everything they had, but the German assault guns were too powerful and the terrain offered no protection. Only the arrival of American tanks prevented a complete disaster. For 2 days, the 15th Infantry clawed its way south through the Riedweir Woods. Every 100 yards was contested. German counterattacks came without warning, armor and infantry emerging from the snow-covered trees to slam into the American lines. The fighting was close and brutal, often hand-to-hand. Men died in the snow, their blood freezing before it could soak into the earth. And Company B was dying with them. The company had started the Colmar offensive with 235 men. By January 25th, disease and frostbite and enemy fire had reduced that number dramatically. Men who had survived years of combat were falling to mortar fragments and machine gun bursts. Officers were being killed faster than they could be replaced. Murphy watched it happen. He watched the tanks that were supposed to support them burst into flames. Years later, he would describe the scene in words that still carry the horror of that moment. "Our armor pulls ahead of us with gun barrels traversing," he wrote. From the woodland comes a crash of shells. 2 of the tanks burst into flames. Their escape hatches open and the still living members of the crew bail out. Blazing like torches and screaming horribly, they roll in the snow. By the end of January 25th, every officer in Company B had become a casualty except one. Second Lieutenant Audie Murphy, 19 years old, was now the company commander. He was leading men who were a decade older than him. veterans who had seen more combat than most soldiers see in a lifetime. And he was responsible for what remained of them. That number was 18, from 235 men to 18, not even a full platoon. A skeleton crew holding a position at the southern edge of the Riedveer Woods, just north of the German-held town of Holzwihr. They were supposed to receive reinforcements. The reinforcements were delayed. On the morning of January 26th, Murphy positioned his men as best he could along the tree line. The ground was still frozen. They still could not dig foxholes. Their only armor support was a single M10 tank destroyer parked near Murphy's forward command post. One tank destroyer against whatever the Germans decided to throw at them. Murphy established his position at the edge of the woods, looking out across the snow-covered fields toward Holzwihr. He had a field telephone that connected him to the artillery batteries in the rear. If the Germans attacked, he could call in fire support. It was not much, but it was something. The morning passed slowly. The men huddled in the cold, exhausted from days of continuous combat, their uniforms stiff with frozen sweat. They cleaned their weapons. They checked their ammunition. They watched the tree line to the south and waited. Murphy scanned the fields through his binoculars. Holzwihr sat quiet in the winter haze, smoke rising from chimneys where German soldiers were keeping warm. Beyond the town, the Vosges Mountains rose against the gray sky. Somewhere out there, more Germans were massing. He could feel it. The wait ended shortly after 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Murphy saw them first. 6 tanks rumbling out of Holzwihr, splitting into groups of 3, fanning out toward either side of the clearing. Behind the tanks came the infantry. Wave after wave of white dots moving across the snow, barely visible against the frozen landscape. German soldiers in winter camouflage, 250 of them at least, advancing in disciplined formation toward the woods where 18 Americans waited. The elite 2nd Mountain Division had come to finish what the Volksgrenadiers had started. Murphy grabbed the field telephone and called for artillery. Then he gave the order that would define the next hour of his life. He told his 18 men to fall back to prepared positions deeper in the woods. He did not go with them. He stayed at his forward post, alone, with nothing but his carbine and the telephone, and the burning determination that had carried him through every battle since Sicily. The Germans were coming, and Audie Murphy was not going to run. The German artillery opened up first. Shells screamed across the frozen fields and exploded among the trees, sending showers of wood splinters and frozen earth into the air. Murphy pressed himself against the ground at his forward position, the field telephone clutched in one hand, his carbine in the other. Through the smoke and snow, he could see the German tanks advancing, their long guns tracking back and forth as they searched for targets. He shouted coordinates into the telephone. Seconds later, American artillery answered. Explosions blossomed among the advancing German infantry, throwing bodies into the air, tearing gaps in their formations. But the Germans kept coming. They were veterans of the Eastern Front, hardened by years of combat against the Soviets. A few artillery shells were not going to stop them. Murphy raised his carbine and began firing at the white-clad figures moving through the snow. He was completely alone now. His 18 men were in the woods behind him, dug into whatever cover they could find. Between Murphy and the German assault force, there was nothing but open ground. The M10 tank destroyer sat about 10 yards to his right. Its crew was inside, trying to engage the German tanks. The M10 was a powerful vehicle, armed with a 3-inch gun that could punch through most German armor. But it was lightly protected, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than direct combat. Against 6 enemy tanks, it was badly outmatched. A German shell found its mark. The impact lifted the front of the tank destroyer off the ground. Flames erupted from the engine compartment. Black smoke poured into the winter sky. The crew scrambled out of the hatches, their uniforms smoldering, and sprinted for the tree line without looking back. Murphy watched them go. The M10 was now a burning wreck. Its fuel tanks could ignite at any moment. Worse, the vehicle was loaded with high-explosive anti-tank shells that could detonate without warning. Anyone within 50 yards would be killed instantly. But the tank destroyer still had one weapon that had not been destroyed. Mounted on top of the turret was a .50 caliber machine gun. And that machine gun was still pointed toward the advancing Germans. Murphy did not hesitate. He ran to the burning vehicle and climbed onto the hull. Flames licked at his boots as he pulled himself up to the turret. Smoke swirled around him, burning his eyes and throat. He grabbed the handles of the .50 caliber and swung it toward the enemy. The Germans were less than 100 yards away now. He could see their faces through the smoke. He squeezed the trigger. The .50 caliber roared to life. Heavy rounds tore across the snow-covered field at nearly 3,000 feet per second. German soldiers who had been advancing in disciplined formation began to fall. Others dove for cover in ditches and behind the hulks of destroyed vehicles. Murphy swept the gun back and forth, pouring fire into anything that moved. Lieutenant Walter Weispenning, watching from the tree line, later described what he saw. With the Germans 100 yards away, he climbed onto the tank destroyer turret and began firing its .50 caliber machine gun at the advancing Krauts. He was completely exposed to the enemy fire, and there was a blaze under him that threatened to blow the destroyer to bits. Murphy was standing on a time bomb. The ammunition inside the M10 could cook off at any second. The fuel tanks could explode. German shells and bullets were striking the vehicle all around him. He was exposed from his ankles to his head, silhouetted against the trees and the snow behind him. Every German soldier on that field could see exactly where he was. They tried to kill him. Machine gun fire raked the tank destroyer. Rifle rounds cracked past his head. The German tanks traversed their guns toward his position and opened fire. One shell struck the M10 and detonated, engulfing Murphy in a cloud of smoke and flame. His clothing was torn by flying fragments of steel and stone. He kept firing. A squad of 12 German soldiers had worked their way into a ditch on Murphy's right flank. They were crawling toward him, trying to get close enough to throw grenades onto the burning vehicle. Murphy spotted them and swung the .50 caliber around. He killed all 12 before they could get within throwing range. Another shell struck the tank destroyer. The vehicle shuddered beneath him. More smoke, more flames. Murphy felt something tear into his leg. He looked down and saw blood soaking through his trousers. A piece of shrapnel had opened a wound in his thigh. He did not climb down. He did not call for a medic. He grabbed the field telephone with one hand while keeping the other on the machine gun and called for more artillery. The officer on the other end asked how close the Germans were. Murphy's response would become legendary. "Just hold the phone," he shouted, "and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." American shells began falling among the German positions. The combination of artillery fire and Murphy's relentless machine gun assault was creating chaos in the enemy ranks. German soldiers who had been advancing with confidence were now pinned down, unable to move forward, taking casualties every time they raised their heads. Still, they pressed the attack. German infantry reached as close as 10 yards from Murphy's position, close enough to see the whites of his eyes. Close enough to hear him cursing at them over the roar of the .50 caliber. He mowed them down at point-blank range. For an hour, this continued. One man on a burning tank destroyer against 250 German soldiers and 6 tanks. Smoke and fire swirling around him. Bullets and shells hammering the vehicle from every direction. His leg wound, bleeding into the snow that was melting from the heat of the flames beneath him. Then, through a break in the clouds, American fighter bombers found the battlefield. They dove on the German positions, strafing and bombing the enemy troops who had spent the last hour trying to kill the man on the burning tank destroyer. The combination of air attack, artillery fire, and Murphy's one-man stand finally broke the German assault. The infantry began falling back toward Holzwihr. The tanks reversed and retreated. Murphy had won. He was out of ammunition. The .50 caliber had chewed through every belt he could find on the destroyed vehicle. His leg was soaked with blood. His uniform was shredded and scorched. He could barely see through the smoke that had been stinging his eyes for the past hour. He climbed down from the tank destroyer and began walking back toward the woods. Years later, he would describe that walk in his autobiography. As if under the influence of some drug, he wrote, "I slide off the tank destroyer and, without once looking back, walk down the road through the forest. If the Germans want to shoot me, let them. I am too weak from fear and exhaustion to care." The question that would haunt him for the rest of his life formed in his mind as he stumbled through the snow. How come I am not dead? He reached the tree line where his men were waiting. They stared at him as if he were a ghost. The medic moved toward him, reaching for the wound on his leg. Murphy pushed him away. There was no time for that. The Germans had retreated, but they had not been destroyed. They would regroup. They would come back. Murphy was not going to let his men sit in those woods and wait for the next assault. He gathered the survivors of Company B around him. 18 exhausted soldiers who had just watched their 19-year-old commander hold off an army single-handed. He told them they were going to counterattack. They were going to push the Germans back to Holzweiler and make sure they stayed there. No one argued. They followed him out of the woods and across the same field where Murphy had made his stand. The snow was littered with German bodies. The burning tank destroyer still smoldered behind them. They drove the Germans back. They secured the position that had almost been overrun. Only then did Audie Murphy allow the medic to treat his wounded leg, and even then, he refused to be evacuated. He stayed with his men. When asked after the war why he had seized the machine gun and taken on an entire company of German infantry, Audie Murphy gave a simple answer. They were killing my friends. Murphy's one-hour stand had killed or wounded approximately 50 German soldiers. The artillery fire he directed from the burning tank destroyer killed dozens more. But the true measure of what he accomplished that afternoon lies in what did not happen. Company B was not overrun. The woods were not lost. The German counterattack that could have unraveled the entire American advance was stopped by a single 19-year-old soldier standing on a burning vehicle. The next day, January 27th, the 30th Infantry Regiment returned to action and captured Holzweiler. Murphy's stand had bought the time they needed to reorganize and push forward. By January 29th, the 30th Infantry had reached the Colmar Canal. The northern jaw of the Allied pincer was closing on the German 19th Army. In the south, French forces were fighting their way north with equal determination. On February 2, 1945, the city of Colmar itself fell to elements of the French 5th Armored Division. German resistance began to crumble across the pocket. Units that had held their positions for months were now retreating toward the Rhine, hoping to escape before the trap closed completely. By February 9th, it was over. General de Lattie de Tassigny announced the elimination of the Colmar Pocket. The last German bridgehead on French soil had been destroyed. For the fourth time in 75 years, the province of Alsace had changed hands between France and Germany. This time, the change would be permanent. The cost had been staggering. The German 19th Army lost the bulk of its experienced combat troops. Only the 708th Volksgrenadier Division escaped somewhat intact. The Germans left behind 55 armored vehicles and 66 artillery pieces. Thousands of soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured. The American and French forces paid their own price in blood. Company B of the 15th Infantry Regiment, which had entered the battle with 235 men, finished it with fewer than 20. Similar losses had been suffered across the 3rd Infantry Division and the other units that fought in the frozen hell of Alsace. The elimination of the Colmar Pocket opened the path to Germany. The 6th Army Group could now concentrate on Operation Undertone, the assault to penetrate the Siegfried Line and carry the war into the German heartland. The end was coming. Everyone could feel it. But for Audie Murphy, the fighting was over. Brigadier General Ralph B. Lovett and Lieutenant Colonel Hallett D. Edson had witnessed or received reports of Murphy's actions at Holzweiler. They recommended him for the Medal of Honor, the highest award for valor that the United States military could bestow. The recommendation worked its way up the chain of command, reviewed at each level by officers who read the accounts of what Murphy had done and shook their heads in disbelief. On February 16, 1945, Murphy was promoted to first lieutenant. More significantly, he was removed from the front lines and assigned as a liaison officer at regimental headquarters. The Army had decided that the most decorated soldier in the European theater was too valuable to risk in further combat. The 3rd Infantry Division received the Presidential Unit Citation for its actions in the Colmar Pocket, adding another decoration to Murphy's already crowded uniform. But the recognition he had earned at Holzwihr would not come until months later, after the war in Europe had ended. On June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria, Lieutenant General Alexander Patch, commander of the 7th Army, presented Audie Murphy with the Medal of Honor and the Legion of Merit. Murphy stood at attention while the general pinned the pale blue ribbon around his neck. He was 20 years old. He had been in combat for 2.5 years. He had killed approximately 240 German soldiers. He had been wounded 3 times and decorated more than 30 times. The official citation for the Medal of Honor described his actions in the measured language of military bureaucracy. 2nd Lieutenant Murphy's indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction and enabled it to hold the woods, which had been the enemy's objective. Those words, accurate as they were, could not capture what had actually happened on that frozen field. They could not convey the heat of the flames, or the crack of the bullets, or the screams of the men he killed. They could not explain why a 19-year-old boy had chosen to climb onto a burning tank destroyer instead of running for his life. Only Murphy could explain that, and his explanation was simple: they were killing my friends. When the war ended, Audie Murphy came home to a hero's welcome. On July 16, 1945, his face appeared on the cover of Life magazine, the most widely read publication in America. Parades were held in his honor. Banquets and speeches celebrated his achievements. Actor James Cagney, one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, saw the Life cover and invited Murphy to California. Murphy accepted. Over the next 2 decades, he appeared in more than 40 films, most of them westerns, that capitalized on his boyish good looks and soft Texas drawl. In 1955, he starred in the film adaptation of his autobiography, To Hell and Back, playing himself in a recreation of the battles he had survived. The movie became the highest-grossing film in Universal Pictures history, a record it would hold for 20 years until a shark named Jaws finally surpassed it. But the cameras and the fame could not erase what the war had done to him. Murphy suffered from what doctors at the time called battle fatigue. Today, we would recognize it as post-traumatic stress disorder. He could not sleep without nightmares. He could not relax without reliving the horrors he had witnessed. He kept a loaded pistol under his pillow every night, and actor David Niven reported that Murphy would sometimes fire the weapon when startled awake. The insomnia drove him to sleeping pills. He became addicted to a powerful sedative called Placidol, dependent on the drug just to get a few hours of rest. When he realized how deep the addiction had become, he locked himself in a motel room for a week and forced himself through withdrawal without medical help. His first wife, actress Wanda Hendricks, witnessed the private torment behind the public hero. She watched him weep over newsreel footage of German war orphans. She saw the guilt that consumed him, the weight of all those deaths pressing down on a man who had never asked to become a killer. Murphy remarried and had 2 sons, but the demons never left him. He struggled with money, losing much of his earnings to gambling and failed business ventures. He declared bankruptcy in 1968. Despite his financial troubles, he refused lucrative offers to endorse alcohol and cigarettes. He did not want to set a bad example for the young people who looked up to him. In an era when soldiers were expected to suffer in silence, Audie Murphy spoke publicly about his psychological wounds. He called on the government to study the emotional impact of combat and to provide better care for veterans returning from Korea and Vietnam. He testified before Congress. He gave interviews. He did everything he could to ensure that other soldiers would not have to fight the same invisible battle he was losing. On May 28, 1971, a private plane carrying Murphy crashed into Brush Mountain near Catawba, Virginia. The weather that day was terrible, with rain and fog and near zero visibility. The pilot should never have taken off. Murphy was 45 years old, just a few weeks short of his 46th birthday. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. His grave, marked by a simple white headstone like all the others, has become one of the most visited sites in the cemetery. Veterans and civilians alike make pilgrimages to pay their respects to the most decorated soldier of the Second World War. In 1973, the Audie L. Murphy Memorial VA Hospital opened in San Antonio, Texas, a direct result of the legislation Murphy had championed for veterans' mental health. The hospital continues to serve those who followed in his footsteps, soldiers who came home from their own wars carrying their own invisible wounds. And in Holtzwihr, France, the people Murphy helped liberate have not forgotten. On January 29, 2000, 55 years after the battle, the village dedicated a memorial at the exact spot where Murphy made his stand. The monument sits quietly on a country road north of town, away from the highways and main streets. It is intended for the people who walk through the fields for exercise or relaxation, a reminder of what happened on that frozen ground. The inscription is simple. Visitor, respect this memorial and forget not that these soldiers have died so that you live free. The fields around Holtzwihr are peaceful now. Farmers work the land that was once soaked in blood. Children play in the snow that once concealed advancing German soldiers. The burning tank destroyer is long gone, replaced by crops and quiet roads and the ordinary rhythms of village life. But the memorial remains, and the story it tells will endure as long as men and women are willing to remember what courage looks like when everything seems lost. On January 26, 1945, a 19-year-old soldier climbed onto a burning tank destroyer and refused to let go. For 1 hour, he stood alone against an army. Flames beneath his feet, bullets cracking past his head, Germans closing to within 10 yards of his position. He was not fighting for medals, he was not fighting for glory, he was fighting for Lattie Tipton, who died believing a white flag meant surrender. He was fighting for the 18 men in the woods behind him, the last survivors of a company that had been 235 strong. He was fighting because that was all he knew how to do. They were killing my friends. Audie Murphy carried the weight of that frozen field for the rest of his life. The nightmares never stopped. The guilt never faded. The war followed him home and never left. But on that January afternoon when everything seemed lost, one man proved that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand when every instinct screams to run. He was 19 years old, and he held the line.